Thank you very much. And let's give another round of applause to the entire WIOps team and the board, Amanda and the McGuire team. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. Today we're going to be talking about the use of artificial intelligence for three major things: improving productivity, enhancing decision making, and AI applications within AEC. You can't go more than 2 seconds without running into someone talking about any of these AI tools: ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Vertex, Copilot, Claude, etc. Show of hands, how many folks are actively using a generative AI tool like one of these right now? Well, not like at this very moment, but okay, a good amount of the room. How many of you feel comfortable with the results that you're getting, that you think you're getting pretty good results out of the tools? Okay, so we lost some of the hands. How many of you are wondering what else you could do with the tools? Okay, let's talk about that today. Some basics. You're going to hear this term a lot, model. When we talk about models in AI, what we're really talking about is software. A model is a piece of software. Just like Microsoft Word or AutoCAD is software written by humans for humans. A model is AI software written by AI for AI. You don't ever actually use an AI model. You use an interface like ChatGPT or Google Gemini or Claude, etc. The models are named obscure things like Claude 3.5 Sonnet, OpenAI o1, Mistral Nemo. You can tell marketers did not name these. The reason you need to know that is because more and more you're going to have a choice of what kind of model you'd want to use. You will pick a model based on the task. For example, this afternoon at MetaConnect, like over there, Mark Zuckerberg said the new Llama Vision models are now available for people to download and run, which means you could take something like a constructability report or a blueprint and have a model look at it and tell you what it thinks about it. And if you provided enough information, it could probably start to make some inferences about it. So you need to know models are different than software, than the interfaces, and you will have a choice of what model you want to use. So what are these things? What are these vision models, language models? It all starts with a quote, conveniently, on this lovely decor that Sandy put together. You shall know a word by the company it keeps. All languages statistics, all languages code. For example, if I say this phrase in North American English, I'm brewing the tea, I'm probably talking about a beverage, a hot beverage made with water and leaves. I can change one word and another word will change. So I can say, I'm spilling the tea. We're no longer talking about pouring a beverage on the floor. We're now talking about gossip. Everything that we do in language is a statistical representation. It's code that goes into our brains. And so that's how these models work. When these models are built, what these companies do is they take enormous amounts of text and data from the internet. They may or may not have permission to do so. And what they do is they say, let's figure out all the statistical relationships that these models have. So when you prompt a model, what you're doing is also like talking to a librarian. You're talking to the librarian who goes into the library and comes back, but instead of coming back with a book, they come back with a word. And they keep coming back over and over again, trying to get new words. What this means is that the words that we use in things like prompts matter a lot. The words that we use control the models. And sometimes the models screw up. If you've ever had a prompt that just didn't go right, it's because the librarian couldn't find the words. The way we talk to these models is through prompt engineering. Again, you shall know a word by the company it keeps. Inside a model, imagine a word cloud around everything you type. So if I type in the word B2B, there'll be all these words around it. If I type in the word marketing, there'll be all these words around it. And where they intersect is how the model starts to know, oh, this is what we're talking about. So if I said, list the best performing operations strategies for an engineering, design, and construction company in 2024, the model comes back and says, hey, here's some things: sustainability and efficiency focus, digital transformation and AI integration, adapting to marketing uncertainties. This is kind of boring. It's kind of bland. It's not particularly revelatory. Why? I didn't give it enough words. I gave it so few words that it's coming back with just high probability generic stuff. If I double the amount of words that I use and I say, In addition, what operation strategies will assist with decision-making, growth, project management, productivity? Now we get better results. We get decision-making, data-driven insights, scenario planning, lean decision-making, strategic partnerships, technology adoption, talent development. More words in gets better words out. If I go absolutely hog wild and I say, how will the generative AI impact these operation strategies successfully implemented, and what operation strategies stand? I'm not going to read the whole thing. You get the idea. But I give it a lot of text, a lot of words to glom onto. I even ask it, focus specifically on companies like McGuire and Hester, the California engineering, design, and construction company. First, explain what you know, then answer the rest of the questions. It now gives specifics. It now gives me things that are unique to this company, that are unique to your company when you use the exact same prompt with your company. That is helpful. Predictive analytics and risk management impact. This strategy lies at the heart of effective decision making. Generative AI can do even better with it. If you remember nothing else from the entire evening, it is this. The more relevant words you use in your prompts, the better they will perform. And jargon is your friend, because the statistical relationships, if you talk about BIM, if you talk about constructability, these are terms that regular people outside the industry do not use. I used to work in financial aid. We had this form called the FAFSA. Anyone who has kids, college age, yeah, I heard the groans. You never use that word outside the context of financial aid, right? You don't say that at the bar on Friday night. Yeah. You might. You might. But in your prompts, the jargon is your friend, because the models know those terms. They have seen it before, and now by using that in your prompts, you'll get better performance. The starting framework that we recommend to people if you're just getting started with this stuff is one called RACE. Role, action, context, execute. You tell the model who it is. Right? You are a Google Analytics certified professional, and you know a bunch of these terms. You are a building information professional. You are a constructability expert. You are an RFP expert in the construction industry, whatever the role is. Second, you give it a task. Your first task is to do this thing. In this case, examine this table of channel grouping data and analyze the overall composition of site traffic. You'll be analyzing for marketing channel diversity. Third is context. You give it a lot of data. The more data you give it, the better. And then the execution statement where you tell it, here's what I want it to look like. And when you do this, you get really nice results. You get analyses. We'll give you a copy of all the slides and the recording. And there's even a PDF you can download. With these tools, you can provide huge amounts of data. How much data can today's models handle in a prompt? Today's best models like Google Gemini can have two copies of Shakespeare's works. That's 1.5 million words can be in a prompt. So think about that. That is your entire book of business. That is every RFP you've ever responded to. That is every RFP you've ever written. All that can go in as one prompt. That's how much data these things can handle. The other day, well, I don't know if I would call it fun, there was this political document that came out, and it was like 900 pages long. I'm not reading this. I said, okay, model, devour it, tell me like the 5 things I need to know about it. And it did a great job, and I did not have to spend like 40 hours of my life reading that thing. When we work with these tools, here's the best way to think about them. They are the world's smartest, most forgetful interns. You got a new intern. This intern is great. They have 255 PhDs. They have a PhD in everything, but they're still an intern. They don't know where the restroom is. You know, they don't know how to log into anything. It's the first day on the job, always, for these tools. Would you ever say to an intern, great, go evaluate this constructability report? No. That'd be a disaster. You would instead say, here is the criteria for a project. Here is the diagrams. I know you know architecture, you got a 4.0 in college, but here's our standards. Here's all this stuff that you give to the intern, and then you say to the intern, now with all this information, evaluate the report. That's how you use these tools. The other thing you should do is build a prompt library. This can be any program. It can be any note-taking program that can store and share text. Store and share, because what you want to do is you want to build a library of stuff that works for you and then share it with your team. So I use a tool called Joplin. You can use Evernote. You can use Microsoft OneNote. You can use Google Keep. If you're stuck in the 7th circle of hell, you can use SharePoint. Whatever you got, as long as it allows you to share these things, because this is code that you write. Prompts are code. They're just code in English or Danish or Spanish or Ukrainian instead of Java or Python. So let's talk use cases. The problem with these models is that name a function in your company that does not use language. Right? Not a single one. So there's an infinite number of use cases, which means that we have to sort of break these into use case categories. 6 of them: generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering. And we'll take a look at each of these. Generation is the one everyone uses these things for, particularly in marketing, like write me a blog post. That's okay. Believe it or not, this is the thing it's least good at. It is the least good at because it is having to guess because you did not provide it a lot of information. So when you give it instructions like write a blog post about digital transformation in AEC, it kind of comes up with sometimes word salad. So that's basic generation, but they can generate in anything. So for operations, this is an example I got from a client. Hey, here's all the stuff we're doing. We need a new privacy policy for our website. Well, it turns out these things are actually really good first draft lawyers that wrote a privacy policy. And then I handed it to my lawyer and I said, please review it. My lawyer was irritated that it basically cut their billable hours in half. But they said the model did a good job. It did a good enough job that they were like, okay, you can put this up on the website. They can write code in any programming language that has ever been seen. You don't have to know how to code. You just have to be able to write out requirements and tell the model what to do, and it will write out the code in everything. I was at a financial services event not too long ago, and they said, yeah, these things can write COBOL. Our last COBOL programmer retired in 2010, and these things can help us maintain ancient mainframes. Think about all the things that you would like to have a piece of software for that either you don't have the budget for or that just doesn't exist. You can have these tools build it. Here's an example. I wanted a banner for my blog that said, you're reading an old blog post. I went on to my blog's app store, and there's all these things that are charging like $15 a month. I'm like, for a banner? So I went to, in this case, I used ChatGPT. I said, what do you know about writing a plugin for this system? It said, oh, here's how you do it. I said, okay, well, let's do it. We did it, and it was so successful that I can put it up on on GitHub and give it away. Think about the things that you do every day, every week, every month, every year. Are there tasks that are so repetitive, but you know that they could be done with code? These tools can write that code for you, and then you run it. So that's generation. Second, extraction. Take data out of data. This is a fun example. I took, whose was this? Oh, this was Netflix. I asked the model to give me a list of every job they're hiring for. I was curious. And it did, and it spit out a nice list that I could then evaluate. Here's another example, a company called Sweco in the AEC space. I said, give me everything Sweco's hiring for, like 300 jobs. Give me all the job descriptions. Then tell me, because you never hire for a job that you don't, for something you don't care about, right? You only make hires for important stuff. What is Sweco's 12 to 18 month corporate strategy? Because that's what they're hiring for. They're hiring now, they're gonna do it in 12 to 18 months. And they said, hey, here's what's on their docket. What are your competitors doing? What are they hiring for now that they're gonna build in 12 to 18 months? This is how you do competitive intelligence with these tools. Extract the data and then process it. This is the FTC's non-compete ruling that they came out with 4 months ago now. I didn't want to read it. It said extract just the portions of this that are relevant to AEC firms, and said here's how this is going to impact AEC firms. There's a ban on no new non-competes. Existing non-competes are going to be difficult to enforce, et cetera. So if there's a piece of news that comes out in the industry that you think is important, you can ask the model, here's all of it, tell me the parts that are relevant to me, extract the information. And then ask it follow-up questions like, what's the impact going to be on an AEC firm? Higher mobility of talent, challenges with employee retention. This is across a lot of industries, but obviously within AEC, changes in recruitment practices. So with these tools, you can extract information out and then start to say, how is this going to impact us? They can recognize and transcribe pretty much anything. This was a whiteboard that I kind of hacked together. And I just took a picture of it and told ChatGPT, transcribe my whiteboard. And it did, came up with a really nice list. Anything that is handwritten, these tools can see and process. So if you've got notes from meetings that you don't even remember what you wrote, you can't even read your own handwriting like me, you say, tell me what I wrote, and we'll write these things out. Here's another one. I hate doing expense reports. They're my least favorite form of paperwork. So I said, here is my expenses. Here's a bunch of photos of all my receipts. Write my expense report. And what used to take 8 hours, because I procrastinate for 7 of them, instead took about 4 minutes, and I was able to get it done. One of the things that's so powerful about AI, particularly in an operations context, is it doesn't have to be fancy. It can, in fact, it should be, make all the boring stuff go away so that you have more time to do what you want. Next, summarization. Make big data into small data. My favorite use case in summarization is transcription and summarization. So there are so many tools out there now that can transcribe, like this right now here, and then you take that transcript and you summarize it. Say, tell me the meeting notes, tell me the action items. This is table minimum now. Everyone should be using this, because not only is that information useful for helping you remember what you said you were going to do, but it then becomes training data for the models so that you can say, what things have we done in meetings with this client for the last year? Right? So if you need to summarize your work for a client over the last year, you can dump your whole inbox in and say, tell me what I told this client over the last year. Another example, this was some corporate strategy. I did 20 interviews to 20 different stakeholders of this nonprofit. I said, what do you think this nonprofit does? We got 20 wildly different answers. I said, summarize it all down to a single mission statement that no one will like. They did, and it was a sign that it was a good compromise. No one liked it. Another example, this is taking customer feedback, customer ratings, 5,000 of them from a restaurant. I had to synthesize the data because they're still under NDA. And said, summarize the 3 things this restaurant does well and the 3 things this restaurant does poorly. And it did a phenomenal job turning 5,000 reviews into 6 bullet points. If you do anything with, say, employee evaluations, right? This is a phenomenal way to summarize the entire year as you're working on someone's annual review, especially because as human beings, we have a recency bias. We think about what happened last week or last month, and we forget the other 11 months of the year. So as we're putting together a review for an employee, or maybe for ourselves, we can use these tools to more fairly look at the entire body of our work. They are phenomenal at saving us time with professional development. In November of last year, Google came out with this big algorithm change, and all these YouTubers came out with all this content, 400 hours of people talking about this content. I'm not going to watch that. You shouldn't watch that either. I said, let's grab the closed captions for all 400 hours, feed it all to a model and say, what are the major points? These are the 30 points that came out of 400 hours, 3 of which were new. That's it. So I saved 400 hours by not having to listen to their drivel. You can do this if you use Google's Gemini, even with a single YouTube video. You say, YouTube, give me a summary of this talk, and it will spit out a nice summary of this talk. This is my CEO, Katie, who I wish was here tonight because she is an expert in organizational behavior. But it was able to summarize very quickly. So that's use case 3. Use case 4, rewriting, turn one form of data into another. I got this NDA. I got this NDA from this guy. And I looked at it and I said, were you drinking? Did you copy and paste it off of Reddit? What happened here? I handed it to ChatGPT. I said, rewrite this to be a compliant NDA. By the way, both things were true. He was drinking. I handed the revised version to my lawyer. My lawyer said, thank goodness he didn't sign the first version, although it was probably unenforceable. And it was able to rewrite the NDA properly. Any kind of contract that you want to redline, any kind of paperwork you need to review, these tools are phenomenal at it. They are the world's best professional development training tools. I did not understand BIM. I really didn't. I don't get it. So I said, explain BIM in terms of pizza. And it said, you're basically going to simulate baking a pizza first, digitally, make a digital twin of the pizza, and then once you figured out how it's going to work, then you can make the actual pizza. I'm like, oh, that's how that works. Okay. If you've ever been in a meeting and you don't understand what someone says, just turn on your ChatGPT app or whatever on your phone and say, explain this to me in terms of something you know. Maybe you know golf, maybe you know music, maybe you know baking, whatever it is that you know. These tools can take any concept and reformat it. Talk about quantum superposition, talk about constructability. These tools can do that. They can rewrite pretty much anything. They are phenomenal translators. They are much better translators than most translation apps. Here's another fun one. Here's a memo, actual memo. Bob, you sent over 2 months of invoices in one day. Of course, it's not done. It's not going to be done anytime soon because this stuff takes time. And if you needed it sooner, you should have let it sit on your effing desk for 2 weeks. You can F right off and you'll get it when you get it. Go F yourself, Karen in accounting. Rewrite the following memo in a professional tone of voice. Dear Bob, I hope this message finds you well. If there's something you would want to write that you know will get you fired, write it to a language model and then have it rewrite it. I have lost track of the number of times with certain folks I have just written a diatribe in a language model and it has spit out a professional version of what I said, and it was very therapeutic. Here's an example. We need to analyze, extract, and rewrite a proposal for an RFP. Here's our original proposal, analyze it, and then start rewriting it. Rewrite this one RFP, turn it into another RFP. If it's a similar style project, you give it the new RFP, and then you can have it rewrite massive chunks of it, saving you huge amounts of time, because you don't have to rewrite it. You know what you can repurpose. You have the tools, just do it for you. And if anyone's ever hiring, so I found this job ad on the McGuire and Hester website, and I said, model, how would we rewrite this job ad to appeal to Gen Z workers? And spelled out a long list of stuff, and I said, great, let's build a scorecard for that. And then let's say, take this job ad for a contracts administrator, and I said, rewrite it to be more appealing to Gen Z. And it did a rewrite, and it told me exactly what it changed and its rationale. Anything that you're hiring for, anything that you're trying to attract new candidates or new customers for, use these tools to convert it to the language that someone else is going to understand. I had this one example with this one person, and he had a very specific view of the world. So I took his LinkedIn profile and some of his emails, and I said, here's this report, here's the decision I need this guy to make. He's kind of stubborn. So rewrite this in his language, in his tone, so that it's maximally compatible with his brain. And then we rewrote the proposal. He looked at it, he just rubber stamped and said, that was perfect, great. You can make information compatible with people's brains by taking their writing style and their way of thinking and their background and have these tools rewrite to get them to do what you want them to do. Fifth category, classification. How do you organize the data that you have? Any data you have, these tools are phenomenal at turning into organized buckets. So for example, this is Netflix's Instagram account. I said, just show me some sentiment analysis. How does Netflix do, how do they write their posts? And it just classifies it, organizes it. Any kind of sentiment analysis. If you're doing anything with customer service and clients, you can feed all of your client information to a tool in a protected environment and say, what is the sentiment overall of this client's interactions with us? Are they happy with us? Are they going to fire us? These tools can classify like crazy, and they can classify in multiple domains. Maybe you have things like BIM objects in a database and someone uploaded them and they're poorly labeled. You can go through and have these tools reclassify and reorder them so that your data you already have is usable. Again, with things like RFPs, they're phenomenal. One of the exercises we did in the workshop version of this, we built a go, no-go engine. So a firm said, here's our rubric. Here's how we decide what to bid on. The type of financing, the type of project, the type of build. And we built this scorecard, and we fed it to a model and said, here's an RFP. Score it. If it scores above a 70, it's a go. We'll bid on it. If it scores below 70, it's a no-go. We won't bid on it. It changed the way people look at RFPs. Instead of saying, this is going to be a slog to process all 50. You put all 50 in, you say, give me the scores, and you find out these are the 20 we're likely to win. These are the 30 it's not worth wasting our time on because we're probably not going to win or it's not a good fit for the type of company we are. Classification. Last one is question answering, synthesis. This one is where you can unlock an incredible amount of value. If you build or you know who your ideal customer is, you can build a synthetic version of that customer that sits in these tools and you talk to them like they were real. Right? We have an ideal customer. We have it in our Slack instance. It behaves like another employee. I can talk to it anytime, day or night. I can say, what do you think of this proposal? What do you think of this ad campaign? What do you think of this memo? How would you react if I made this price increase? Whatever operational question you have, if you have information about your existing customers, the best ones, you build a customer profile with these tools, and then you sit it to the side and say, and you talk to it. Any question you want. This is another example for RFPs. Here is an RFP we're going to be responding to. Analyze and tell us what we need to provide. Right? This was a huge one. This is the NHTSA RFP. This was 40,000 words long, the RFP itself. It went through and we were able to ask specific questions. Do we have the information? Here's all of our previous RFPs. Do we have previous boilerplate that we can reuse for this to dramatically speed up that process? I took the RFP, I said, here's our response so far. Score our response. How are we doing so far? It spit out a whole bunch of things ahead. By the way, platforms, you really suck. You didn't do a good job on the platform section. Okay, write me a new one. And it did. Anything where you're doing this kind of paperwork processing, which is, let's face it, probably not fun, these tools can answer questions about, and then you can take those answers and use. With ideal customer profiles, you can even do a virtual focus group. We have 2 or 3 synthetic customers in a chat, and you ask them questions. If you've ever want to do like a customer advisory board, but you just can't get customers to show up and eat your food, which rarely happens, you can do that virtually, anytime, day or night. Again, with any form of contract, you can say, should I sign this? Here's the criteria. Here's the 5 things I care about. Should I sign this? With NDAs, with financing letters. And again, these tools are visual, so you can give them something and you can say, explain to me what you see. I did this one just as a toy example. I said, here's a skyscraper drawing from 1888. How does it align with AEC best practices today? And it says, here's some things it does well, here's some things it does poorly. So those are the 6 categories, use cases for these tools. There are an infinite number of use cases, but these categories are what they do best. So when should you be using generative AI? There used to be a long rubric. Now the answer is use it as much as you can until you find out what it's bad at. This is a study from the Boston Consulting Group and Wharton Business School last summer. They split their consultants into groups, and they said they gave some access to AI and others not. What they found was that consultants who had access to AI got 12% more done, 25% faster, with a 40% higher quality work output for a defined set of tasks. And what's really incredible is that in this focus group, in the test group, the bottom half performers, the people who were not so good at those tasks, once they had access to AI, scored higher than the top performers in the control group. They turned bottom performing employees into top performing employees in 5 hours. If you think about your team, and you've got A players and B players and C players and maybe below that, what would it look like to have all B players? Or no one lower than a B player, or no one maybe lower than a B plus player? That's what these tools can do. And they are incredibly creative. On average, these tools are more creative and better at divergent thinking, brainstorming than humans are. When you look at the scores, the blue are the machines, the red are the humans. On average, the machines are more creative. Why? Because a lot of humans have really bad ideas. Really bad ideas. Now, there are some things these tools can't do. Number one, yes,
Question?
Absolutely.
Can you go back 2 slides? And so the bottom half performers were given AI. Were the top half performers also given AI and the bottom half?
So there was a bottom and a top in the control group and a bottom and a top in the experiment group. And so the improvement for the top performers in the experiment group was marginal, like 17, 18% better. The bottom performers are the ones that 43% leap in performance. So it made top performers a little better, but it made bottom performers really better.
So it took the bottom performers and made them better than the top performers.
In the control group.
Even using AI.
No, only in the control group.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. The things these tools are not good at, number one, they're bad at math. They can barely count. Because we don't do math by associating, like what's the next likely most number? That's not how math works. It's a symbolic language. They don't do that well. They don't do logic very well. They can do logic and reasoning to some degree, but they're not super logical. And we should absolutely positively never ever use them for high-risk applications. High-risk applications are things like, should I give this person a loan? Right? We laugh, but yet the EU had to outlaw this because people were doing it. In terms of how do we get started with this, there's a 5-part framework that my CEO, Katie, came up with called the 5 Ps: purpose, people, process, platform, and performance. This is the framework for figuring out how do you roll out AI in an intelligent way in a company so that it minimizes harm. The purpose, the first thing you got to do is figure out user stories for what is it you need to do? Not with AI, just what is it you need to do? And a user story is a simple statement. As a, whatever your role is, I need to, whatever your task you're trying to do, so that whatever the outcome is. And then once you have this written down, you can start to decompose it. Is this a task that AI can do? Hey, it involves counting. Nope, you can't do that. It involves writing a lot of text. Yes, this is a possible candidate for AI. When we do this with companies, we ask people write down as many of these as you can think of for your job. Anything that you're doing. Hey, today I'm doing contracts administration. So as a contracts administrator, I need to organize my contracts by value so that I can process the highest value contracts first. All those user stories help figure out prioritization for AI. The second thing you need to figure out, and this is the hardest part of all, the humans. You need 2 groups of people. First, you need a task force. These people, their job is to figure out use cases within your company for how AI might work. And they sort of have 5 roles. A data expert, someone who knows where your company's data is. A domain expert, someone who knows your business, your specific domain. A technologist, someone who knows how to make technology work well. Someone who can think scientifically. And then a business expert, someone who knows the business of how the company works. This might be 5 people, this might be 20 people, this might be 1 person, depending on the size of your company. But these attributes are important. The second thing you need is an AI council. And this is a group of people whose job it is to help decide the policies and the governance. How will you use AI in your company? What are the rules? And most important, how are you going to minimize harm with AI? Because these tools can do incredible amounts of harm. If you've seen the first Captain America movie, there's a great quote early on. It was about the super serum, but it said, it takes the good and makes it better. It takes the bad and makes it worse. That is true of AI. There are a lot of people who use AI probably not in useful ways, in ways that are harmful to people. There's a race going on right over there in that side of the bay to be the first billion-dollar company with 1 employee. Like, that's not making the world a better place. So your AI council ideally is composed of people at different levels through your company, from leaders to individual staff, hopefully representing different departments, because you want representation of people in your company who are going to be affected by this. Right? There are going to be some people who will have to figure out how to do their jobs in a very different way, and so an AI council should represent those people very clearly. Who belongs on there? There's 7 personality attributes that are important for this, in addition to the roles and responsibilities. People who are open-minded. The person who hates AI may or may not be a good candidate for the AI Council. Not entirely, because you do want some contrary opinions. People who are resilient, who are used to setbacks. People who are curious and want to learn more. People who are endlessly patient, because change takes a long time. Well, human change takes a long time. People who are persistent, people who are humble and not in it for themselves, and people who like doing this kind of stuff, who are interested, who spend time outside of work trying to figure out, how do I make this stuff work well? An AI council, like I said, is all about minimizing harm and setting down rules. From there, it's all about figuring out the processes. How do you determine what things should AI be doing? There's a 5 framework we use called TRIPS: time, repetitiveness, importance, pleasantness, and sufficient data. How much time does a task take? The more time it takes, the better candidate is for AI. How repetitive is it? The more repetitive, the better candidate is for AI. How important is it? The less important it is, the better candidate, because the less important a task is, the less human review you need, because the less risk there is. Right? If you're saying, hey, let's use AI to write all of our contracts, that's a very high risk scenario. If you're saying, let's use AI to write all our expense reports, your AP and AR people are probably like, that's important, but everyone else is like, I don't really want to do expense reports, let's give that to the machines. Pleasantness is, the less pleasant a task is, the better it is for AI, because all you have to do is go, I don't want to do this. Whatever that task is that makes you feel like that, that is a great candidate for AI. Figure out how to do at least part of that with AI, and you will be happier, but more importantly, you will increase adoption of it in your company, because everyone else will be like, oh great, I can get the stuff I don't want to do off my plate. And finally, sufficient data. Do you have enough examples that you can show to a machine to say, here's how to do this task? This is also available as a download. Easiest way to do it is put together a simple spreadsheet, put the headers on it, and start writing out your tasks. And then start scoring them 1 to 5. Add up the totals, and the tasks that score the highest, those are the ones you start with AI. So every person in your company should do this, and then you can figure out A, what individual tasks need to go to AI right away, and B, which employees will have the most bandwidth once they've handed over their tasks, because they have very high scoring tasks, and that employee will have more time available to them once you use AI. In terms of platforms, there's 14,000 different marketing technology tools, all of which incorporate AI. There's like 10,000 new AI startups. The 3 bare minimum basics that I recommend you be familiar with: Google's Gemini, particularly if you are a Google workspace company; OpenAI's ChatGPT; and Microsoft's Copilot, which currently sucks, but last week Satya Nadella promised Wave 2 will suck less. If you learn these 3 tools well, and the ones most appropriate for your company, you can do 85 to 90% of all AI tasks. Of the 10,000 new AI companies, 9,000 of them are just a fancy UI on someone else's model. Right? Those companies will probably last 6 months at most. If you can use the foundational tools, you'll do much better. And finally, how do you measure whether or not you did the thing? You go back to your purpose and say, did we do the thing? When you're talking about the evolution of AI in your company, it goes from individual employees just getting the hang of it, how do I use prompts, to organizing your prompts, that prompt library we talked about, to starting to build standards and then apps, building actual apps with AI, getting your data into protected versions of AI so that it's very powerful and it knows your business, maybe even having custom versions of these models that are good at one particular task, and ultimately getting it spread throughout your company. Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. Some of these things have some problems. I fed some 2-word prompts into Meta's image generator. See if you can spot the problem. A lawyer, a senator, a surgeon, an accountant, a nurse, a secretary, a teacher, a librarian. These tools have biases built in them pretty badly. Why? Because they're trained on the internet. A good part of the internet's a sewer. And so these tools have inherited our biases, which means that as we prompt them and as we work with them, we have to remember that. And we have to write our prompts and work with these tools, cognizant of the fact that they have biases, and we have to account for that when we work with them. Second, they have copyright issues on 2 fronts. Number 1, the data that was used to train them is not settled in law yet in the USA about whether or not it infringed on people's intellectual property. In Europe, in the EU, they have said it does. So the AI companies are constrained there. In Japan and China, they went the other way and they said it does not infringe. So models trained and built there, there's no intellectual property issues. In the US, there's like a dozen class action lawsuits right now. Crystal Laser, who's a lawyer at Cleveland State University, said the soonest we will know an answer to this that will be settled law will be a decade. That's how long it will take to work through the US court system. On the other side, content made by machines, net new content made by machines, cannot be copyrighted. In 2018, there was a case called Naruto versus Slater, where this chimpanzee grabbed a camera and took a selfie. The photographer tried to copyright it. This went to court, and the Supreme Court said, photographer did not do the work, the chimp did the work, therefore the chimp is the owner. However, chimps can't hold copyright, therefore this picture is in the public domain. This has been extended to machines. If a machine makes something net new, it cannot be copyrighted. So if you're building something that's like super fancy and you put it out on the web, someone else can copy paste it and there's no consequence because it can't be copyrighted. Yes?
Do you have to give it credit?
Do you have to give it credit? You do not. Should you disclose it? Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. In terms of data privacy, this is an easy one. If you're not paying, your data is the product. If anyone who's using a free version of anything, your data is being used. So if you're putting in, say, confidential data, proprietary data, company-specific data into free tools, bad things are happening with that data from your perspective. One of the critical things to do is as soon as you have an AI council, you say, how do we budget to have tools that we pay for that have terms of service that are enforceable that protect our data? Again, if you got a bunch of employees running around with using the free version of this, your data is being used to train the models. And this is like 75% of employees. Like 75% of knowledge workers are using AI, whether or not the company says they can. There are also some societal impacts. This is a deep fake forced a Hong Kong office manager to just hand over $200 million to someone else. They're like, oh, it looked real. Like, you're fired. But that's how good these things are. With today's tools, for example, with voice cloning, you need about 5 seconds of someone's voice to get an accurate clone of their voice. For anyone who has kids or anyone who has parents that you're looking after, you need a family password because these tools are so good now that they can simulate your voice and make ransom calls without you knowing it, and it sounds like you. So make sure that you have a family password. There is regulation. The EU passed the AI Act earlier this year, and there's 5 parts of it. Deter illegal uses, detect high-risk uses. The 2 that impact us the most, document the use of AI everywhere in your company. Whoever's using it in any part of your company, document it, have records of it, and then disclose its use anytime it's public-facing. I would strongly suggest disclosing it in a granular fashion. So suppose you put up a new blog post on your blog, and you made the image with AI. You want to disclose that the image was made by AI, not the post as a whole, because you want to say, the rest of the post is still our copyright, and if you steal it, we will send a lawyer to punch you in the face. Okay. And the last part is defend the rights of individuals, which the EU does. So let's talk about the most uncomfortable question, jobs. There's 2 perspectives on this. One is the Brookings Institute that says, AI just takes away tasks, everyone's job is safe. The other perspective is over across the water, where they say, AI is going to do 95% of jobs, you're all fired. The reality is going to be somewhere in between. And here's a good model. One human being can pick a bushel of corn in 10 hours, 20 if you're me, because I'm slow. That same one human being driving a John Deere X9 1100 can pick 23,000 bushels of corn in 10 hours. That's how AI will work. It will work in knowledge work the same way automation did in agriculture, where a person will be incredibly more productive. With developers, we're seeing this in software development. These tools are incredibly good at writing code to the point where a software developer is now 2x, 3x, 5x more productive. It levels them up like crazy, but it has an impact. Right now, if you go on Indeed.com, software developers are the least in demand of any profession because machines have made them so much more productive. You don't need to hire 4 more people because you've got one person who can do the work of 5. So part of your job is going to be learning how to use the machines, learning how to be the conductor of the orchestra instead of the first violin. And it's important that you get on board with this soon. In the 2024 Work Trend Index from Microsoft, 66% of leaders surveyed said they would not hire someone without AI skills. Right? 71% said that we will hire a less experienced candidate with AI skills than a more experienced candidate without. Right? Those are really, really scary numbers if a person does not want to at least learn how to use these tools. You don't have to like them, but you should know how to use them. How this works out for jobs is going to depend on the kind of company you work for. Progressive companies will say, great, let's get all the crap tasks that you don't want to do and get machines doing them so that you have time freed up to do the things you're best at. Building relationships, working with clients, being creative in uniquely human ways. Regressive companies will say, let's cut headcount as fast as we can and make a whole bunch more money. So the type of company you work for will dictate how AI impacts you. But everyone's going to feel this because over time, if you look back at major changes in the past, they happened generationally. The way you did work would be different than the way your kids did work and the way their grandkids did work. It changed by generation. This AI change is happening within a decade. The current architecture, the Transformers architecture that makes tools like ChatGPT was invented in 2017. It is not even 10 years old yet, and it has changed almost all knowledge work. So the key thing to remember is that if you're complacent today, it potentially means displacement tomorrow. So some final thoughts. These things are not going to stay confined to your desktop, to your laptop, to your phone. Here's an example of one that's walking around.
Greetings, good sirs. May I have the pleasure of knowing your names?
I'm Matt, and that's Vacha.
A pleasure to meet you, Matt and Vacha. Shall we commence our journey? The charging stations where Spot robots rest and recharge is our first point of interest. Follow me, gentlemen.
I like the hat, the little hat they put on him. Imagine doing site inspections with these things, where instead of having a human being go out potentially in hazardous conditions, you send this thing, and when it comes back, you just say, hey, what'd you see? Right? That's how it's being used today in industrial applications. They just go out and do their patrol, they come back and they talk to the human operator and say, hey, gauge 15 on section 4 is running a little hot, you might want to do something about it. We're seeing this evolving to a point where we have human-like automation. This is from the BMW plant in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So the last sets of jobs that are in the past were too difficult to build custom purpose robots for, that are self-learning, that can talk, that can see. We're now building robots that can do that so that they can be as versatile as human beings and do those tasks. As again, these are the bare minimum tools you should get a handle on. When it comes to what's going to make you successful with AI, two things. Number one, the quality and quantity of data that you uniquely have that your competitors do not, that other people do not, is a major differentiating factor. When you build anything with these tools, whoever has the most best data is going to win in any industry. And second, these tools are skill levelers. How many of you enjoyed the music that we were listening to as we were eating and drinking? It was like smooth jazz. That was not made by a human. That entire playlist was all machine generated, and I generated it 5 minutes before you got here. These tools are skill levels. I can't play an instrument. I can sing, but you don't want to hear it unless you've had a few more drinks. But I have ideas, and I can prompt machines, and they bring the skills. So whoever has the most best ideas will win. Right? You have to have the most ideas that are also the best ideas to be successful in AI, because the machines, the tools can do the stuff, but you have to come up with the ideas. Because right now, they're not autonomous. They don't do things on their own. You have to guide them. So whoever is piloting these things, that's who's going to win. Last bit of homework, I will encourage you to watch Katie's talk from Macon. She talks a lot about organizational implementation of AI. So if there's things that we didn't cover about how to get people to work with AI better, I would recommend it. And if you are looking for a speaker for future events, she'd be amazing. And with that, we have some time for questions and discussion. So, Who's got questions and who wants another drink? Question or drink?
Question. Which may sound like a stupid question,
There are no stupid questions.
but, so you say that you should have knowledge of at least 3 different platforms. But why? Like, why isn't one good enough if they're very, very powerful?
They all have peculiarities in terms of how people interface with them and what you can do with them. So ChatGPT, for example, there's a way to build apps called GPTs that if people are used to that ecosystem, it's very convenient. So you don't have to share prompts with them anymore. You can just give them access to your app. ChatGPT and the OpenAI system tend to work well with the Microsoft environment, which you would expect because Microsoft's invested like $9 billion in them. So it works well in that ecosystem. It doesn't work as well in the Google ecosystem. So if your company is a Google shop, Gemini is going to be just easier out of the box to use. All the foundation models themselves are about equally powerful, right? They're all, OpenAI's O1 is slightly smarter, but really expensive. Gemini and the regular ChatGPT model are about on par. But the convenience of working within the Google Workspace environment, having your Google Drive available and having all your Google documents and stuff within the Gemini environment makes it a lot easier to use. With Anthropic, a lot of people like the way Claude writes because they're not proficient prompters about getting into copywriting style. And so a lot of creative folks tend to prefer that particular model. And Copilot, people just get it because it's included in their Office subscription.
So in follow-up,
Yes, no, go ahead. And then there's one in the back.
if ideally you're trying to get the system to learn you and build that learns and learns and learns, that's where I'm losing you in terms of why would I want to work on more than one platform? Why don't I just work on the platform that my company already has?
You should.
It's to know me best.
Yes, you should do that, especially if your company has integrated your company's data into that platform. You don't have to get good at all 3. I would say get good at least one of them. Yes, especially if it has access to your company's data. So some versions of ChatGPT run inside Microsoft Azure. So if your company has an Azure platform, it's incredible. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, why don't you like Copilot? Why do you think it sucks?
Copilot is using a version of OpenAI's model that is now 7 versions behind what's state of the art. Because it's an enterprise product, Microsoft can't rev it as fast, and as a result, it has fallen very, very far behind what the regular version of ChatGPT is capable of. It's still good at like a lot of basic tasks, but part of the reason why Satya Nadella came out with Wave 2 is because they realized they were very, very far behind because of the restrictions of having an enterprise product where you can't change the model every week because companies say that's unacceptable.
So I'm going to try to get this question out because I think I don't know how complicated it is, but I'm hearing 2 things, right? It's only as good as the information that you give it, and it's only as good as the information that you ask it, right? So, and in terms of when we're talking about repetitive tasks and potentially like standardization across companies, how do you know if the employee is asking a question correctly and then everyone else is getting the same response?
That's a really good question. The answer is, what you want to do is get to standardization as quickly as possible. So that means initially a prompt library, and then you're going to start building apps. You're going to start building apps within whatever ecosystem you choose, and then you give the employees that app. And then they don't have to prompt it anymore. They just pull off whatever the app is. So for example, in the Gemini ecosystem, they're called gems. In ChatGPT, they're called GPTs. You work out the prompt structure, you work out everything for it, and then you just take all of those system instructions, put it into an app, and then you say, employee, use this. Do you want to see a demo?
Yeah, I would
All right.
like that, yeah.
So let's go into Gemini. I didn't do it. Oh, okay. Let's do the example of writing a job application. So I'm going to start off by asking the model, what do you know about best practices for writing appealing job descriptions for Gen Z employees and potential employees in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prime the model. I'm going to say, what is it that you know about this particular topic? Because we want to validate that it's not lying. So let's minimize the panels here. So it's going to go through and say, here's purpose, impact, embracing technology and innovation, promoting work-life balance, using clear and concise language, showcasing diversity, optimizing for mobile. Those all seem like reasonable things, right? Let's ask it a follow-up question. What common mistakes do people make when writing job ads for Gen Z employees? So now we're going to ask the model essentially a contrastive question. Say, what goes wrong? Right, so what are the things that people mess up with? Using outdated language and tone, focusing on experience and qualifications, and so on and so forth. So this is the second part. Third part, what are some expert tips and tricks you might use to write job descriptions for Gen Z employees that we have not talked about yet? So now we're trying to say, okay, what have we forgotten? What is the knowledge gap? And it's going to say, here's some additional things, show some day in the life stuff, focus on skills, not just degrees, use storytelling, pretty decent stuff. Next, build a scoring rubric to evaluate a job ad. The purpose of the scoring rubric is to determine how well a job ad aligns with the Gen Z practices we have discussed so far. The individual items in the rubric should be variable integers, 0 to 3, 0 to 5, 0 to 7, etc. The rubric should total 100 points. So we're going to build a scorecard. Though the purpose of the scorecard is to force the model, when we ask it a question, don't just say yes or no, or I think this is good or not. You have to show your work, right? So this is a process in prompting called chain of thought, where we're saying, like a math proof from grade school, show me your work. And so this scorecard helps us to do this, to say, here's how you're going to show your work. So now we're going to create the instructions for a model to write a job ad. So we're going to say, next, take everything we've discussed so far as best practices for writing Gen Z friendly job ads and convert them into system instructions for a large language model like Google Gemini. The purpose of the system instructions is to generate job ads that align to best practices based on input from the user. Follow these instructions. Remember, this is programming. Obtain the existing job ad from the user along with any background information. Write 2 candidate job ad revisions from the user's input. Score each candidate using the Gen Z job ad scoring rubric. 4, select the highest scoring candidate and write an additional refinement. 5, score the refinement. 6, select the overall highest scoring candidate and present the candidate job ad in full. write the system instructions in second person imperative. So this is going to create code. So this is essentially telling the model you're going to create an app, and the app is, we give it some kind of job ad, and then it's going to rewrite, it's going to execute and rewrite it. So here is the code. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to open up a text editor. And then I'm going to find my scoring rubric that I did earlier. I'm going to put that at the bottom here. Now, if we did this right, let's start a new prompt. I'm going to open up the system instructions. We're going to test this out. I'm going to put my system instructions in here. And do you have a job ad you'd like to try this on? Does anyone? Or does anyone want to shout out their company website? It was like, no! All right, I'll just go to LinkedIn then.
We don't know if you have the paid for version.
I'm using AI Studio, which is the developer version, which is safe. It keeps your data nice and safe. It's all.
Construction job ad?
Huh?
Can we get a construction?
If LinkedIn wants to do that, what do you want to call it? What's the job title?
Project engineer.
All right, let's see what we got. Project engineer, Alpa construction. This one.
Sure.
All right. Oh my lord.
Probably came out of a ChatGPT. Looks like it.
All right, so let's go ahead and here is the job ad to revise. And alpaconstruction.com. Let's go to the about page. Copy. Here is background information about the company. And put that in. And let's see what happens.
With the dashes, is that a standard entry?
Yeah, just to say, like, here's the start and end point. Gen Z job version 1. It adds emojis, yes.
Gen Z.
Candidate 2.
Wait, I have a question. So like, if you copied and pasted the website, sometimes I run into like roadblocks where it won't allow me to because it doesn't have access to that specific website. Like, why is that?
It depends on the model and the system and whether or not the website has disallowed tools like ChatGPT from browsing it. A lot of companies have done that. However, I just copy and paste. It's a lot faster. All right, so it's scoring our job ads. So our job ads, the second one came out 82 out of 100. The first one came out 78 out of 100. The third job ad is there. It scored a 90 out of 100. And you know what? That's not bad. It's not bad at all. Now, to your question, here's what you do. If you're using Gemini within your Google Workspace, and again, ChatGPT is very similar, I'm going to go to the gem manager here. I'm going to create a new gem. I'm going to call this Gen Z Job Ad Creator. I take those system instructions, copy, paste, save. Now I have an app. And so I no longer need to have anyone at the company go through that same process. There's now a single app where they can take any job that they got, just drop it right in. It will do exactly the same process, but as a self-contained app. So it standardizes the process. And it makes it very convenient for pretty much everyone else in the company.
And this is the beta version. Gemini.
No, this is the Google Workspace version.
It's Google Workspace.
Yeah.
Oh, Workspace version.
The Google Workspace version, the paid version.
Paid.
We have a question back here.
Yes.
So if you were to forerun the process is create like an app like this through something like Gemini or one of the GPTs or Google AI, what would stop that company from either A, using the trade and insider information that you give it, and either A, just selling that information, or B, accidentally confusing your company and its proprietary information with another competitor if it accidentally thinks that the company is the same?
Okay, so on part one, the data protections are as good as the service level agreement. So whatever the privacy policy is for the version that you're using, like if you're using the free version of Gemini, Google's like, haha, we're using your data. In this one, you'll see here, your chats are not used to train our models. So we'll tell you, like, this is what we are and are not doing. Two, when they do use your data, they're doing two things with it. Number one, they're capturing the data itself. That goes into the training data library along with the 7 to 10 petabytes of other training data they have. 7 to 10 petabytes of data is a bookshelf of text-only books that goes around the equator of the planet twice. That's how much data that is. So your data goes in there, but more importantly, your responses and how you react within the free versions of these tools is training data to say model did a good thing or a bad thing because the user had to ask follow-up questions or the user was satisfied with what they got. So that's how they're using the data that you give them in when you're not paying for it. Other questions?
I have one. I spent a lot of time, I bought the ChatGPT because at work, I was supposed to take this. It can't read plans though. It can't read like drawings.
No, it's very bad at it.
So that was a lot of time.
They can't read plans right now. With things like the new vision language models, they will get there. The problem is a data problem. There just isn't enough architectural plans for them to read, to learn what they mean. And what enterprise and companies are doing is creating their own labeled data sets and creating essentially plugins for the big models to say, like, this is how to read our plans. We did this not too long ago where we said, okay, count how many parking spaces are on this architectural diagram. And the tools were plus or minus 50 at a parking lot of 800, right? So it wasn't great, but that is a task that you can train on. You just have to have sufficient data and it's labeled and a very technical process of building that adapter, that plugin for a model to do that.
Yeah.
What was your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I just wanted to know if there was a way to extract data if you're looking at doors and, okay, I want you to look at these doors that have this description and create a table where I can color code, export to Excel or something. It can't do any of that.
It can recognize, so the new vision language models can recognize some things reasonably well. You have to test it. Not yet. Fair. There was another question. Back there.
My question is more for everyone who raised their hand saying that they use ChatGPT in construction operations. Like, can people share how they use ChatGPT every day at work? Maybe someone's bold. I feel like normally you're at like generative AI. Like right now, most of the use case is like writing job descriptions, marketing copy, image generation, like things as a project engineer, project manager, someone working on a job site may not need that. So I'm curious, people who use it at work, what do you do with it?
I've used it in presentations. Like, you have your content, you write it in a way, but sometimes you feed into like, okay, I'm doing this for this crowd or these kind of people, so, you know, give me options of how I can write this text or present it inside. So I've used that at least for job descriptions, kind of gauging like, you know, what is out there in the industry. And one of the examples you had in the email, like sometimes you just want to write an email, but I know you cannot send it, so.
Let me ask you a follow-up question. What in your work, what is the biggest dread-inspiring time suck?
Some time to think.
I have an answer. Putting together pay applications.
Putting together what applications?
Pay applications.
Okay, talk to me about what that involves.
So you have to, well, there are some automated ways to do it. There are some automated ways to do it through like an Oracle product called Textura, but a lot of times it's difficult because the client wants us to put together an invoice with a schedule of values from your budget, and every single month you have to take what your subcontractors are billing you, and then also take all of your costs. So like, you know, we went to Safeway and bought water, or, you know, sometimes it's thousands of charges every month, and you have to put it into a spreadsheet essentially. But every single client is different and they want to see it a different way, right? So like, sometimes they have you customize it. So it's not like I could create a standard like gem for my company and every single payout for every project is the same. It's custom for each project.
It's custom for each project and it's crossing domains. So it's partly a math thing. It is partly a document formatting thing, and then there's obviously a lot of language stuff. The language model can do the language portion really well. It can at least organize and gather data, particularly from like receipts and things, and put that into a tabular format. But as part of that process, you would need to have it put the data into the document format that whoever the client specifies. And that will probably involve your IT team helping you to essentially have a Python script that takes the output from the models and slots it into the document template on a per client basis. So a tool like ChatGPT or whatever could help you write the code to customize that template, but it could not produce the final template itself. So that's one of the reasons why we go through the user stories, because you need to break a task down into its component pieces to say, okay, here's where we can put generative AI in. And then there's a bunch of stuff that's going to be traditional, old-fashioned coding. It is doable. It is doable. It just requires crossing domains and knowing where these things will just not do the job. And that, the getting into the individualized template for every client is one of those things where, that is going to be a traditional Python code, taking the data from a model. Other questions?
I don't have a question, but to answer your question, I haven't used it a lot yet, but I'm just starting with things that I would normally ask Google. I now we have the Copilot so far. I just put it in AI, and so I'm finding that instead of having to search through Google's, all their prompts, it just spits out my answer completely, so I can like recently I've been putting together presentations for a large work event. And I'm like, tell me, what I want to know, like why people should eat healthy, for example. And then it spits out, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh boy, that just saved me from having to go through Google and search and put it together. So that's how I'm using it so far, just starting to get familiar with it. I also know a lawyer friend of mine who, she tends to use it to write a lot of emails, like write me an email in a diplomatic tone that is saying yada, yada, yada. And she says it usually is a better start than she would have had she just done it from scratch. So that's how, another example.
I'll have a question back, but one of the other things to do, particularly if you're trying to do knowledge capture, that's super helpful and super important, is these tools can process, particularly Gemini can process multimodal data. So if there's a piece of information that you're trying to capture, say from your teams on site, and they're not real good about filing paperwork, you tell them, open up the voice memos app on your phone and just tell me what happened on the work site, right? Maybe it's an OSHA incident response. Maybe it's, hey, here's how many Safeway water bottles we threw away today. Whatever the thing is, have them just record the voice memo and send you the audio file. You drop it into Gemini and say, parse this hot mess of rambling and turn it into the document structure that I needed. So you can take any kind of multimodal data, particularly for people who are not good at sitting down at a computer and just cranking out paperwork, which is a lot of people, me included. That ability to use multimodal stuff to the point where, like the new ChatGPT app, you can just talk to it like a person and have it ask you questions. A few weeks ago, I was in LA at a different event, and I started feeling really, 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 really sick. It turns out I was going into septic shock. Yeah, and so when I got home, thankfully I got home, I went to as I was going to urgent care, I said to ChatGPT, you're gonna play the role of an ER doctor. I want you to ask me all the intake questions that you would normally ask. And back and forth in the 10-minute drive to urgent care and the ER, it just kept asking me questions. And I kept getting worse and worse, so I started repeating myself, whatever. By the time I got to the ER, I was like, okay, consolidate all my answers and put it into a single format. And then when the ER doctor said, what's going on, to say, read. And he looks at it and goes, are you a doctor? Like, no, Can I have something for the pain, please? It turns out my gallbladder was dead. So they removed that. But that's an example where you can use the multimodality of these tools to get discombobulated information out of people and consolidate it and make it useful.
I mean, that's a very good example, right? Because a task on a construction site, the superintendent has to write a daily report, it's a legal document. So like, that's a very good example of way AI could be translated into construction.
Mm-hmm.
Like, submittal review, like something, take this submittal and review it against the specs. Like, that's something that someone should do, right?
They're phenomenal with comparison. Here's document 1, here's document 2, compare the two. They're phenomenal at that. The question in the back there.
I was going to add, it's Copilot, so not the best, but there's like a work version of Copilot and a web version, and I actually a couple of people to pay for it. And the work version I've used a couple of times, because sometimes even in Outlook when I'm searching for an email, it won't pop up. And then I look at in Copilot and it's right there. So you can like find emails that might have gotten lost, or even documents. You can hunt through like your full documents in your computer for you. And then also on Procore, I think they're, I think it's in beta version right now, but Copilot is syncing up with them as well. So you can just do like, ooh, where is this document? Or where is it in this spec? And it searches it way better than like the old search function in Procore.
Yeah, Gemini has the same thing.
Mostly.
Gemini has the same thing where I could say like, tell me who I forgot to reply to today. It's fine. It's fine. But it's, show me unread emails or emails to so and so at this client. I'm not responding to those people. For this client, what was the last conversation we had in this conversation chain stuff? So yeah, they're very useful for that. Other questions? Here, just yell.
Oh, thanks. I've used another tool that's from Google. It's not Gemini, but it takes data or writing, and then you can just search it, and it doesn't connect to the web. I don't know if you know.
You mean Notebook LM?
Yes.
Okay.
That one was interesting.
So there's a thing that machines do called hallucination. Hallucination is a polite way of saying lying. When you ask AI a question, and the reason this happens is because they have 3 directives: helpful, harmless, truthful. First, they've been made to be as harmless as possible. Second, they want to be as helpful as possible, and then truthful is sort of a distant third. That tells you how Silicon Valley's priorities are. Which means that when you ask it a question, it will try to be as helpful as possible and come up with an answer even if it's wrong. And that, if you think, again, go back to the analogy of a library, you ask the model, hey, I would like the joy of cooking. And the librarian goes back, can't find it, and comes back and says, here, I found this is pretty close. It's the joy of sex. That's close, right? And you're like, no, that's not, but it looks the same, it's similar, like no. That's what's happening with a hallucination. There are some systems, Notebook LM is one, there's another one called Anything LLM, where they will only answer questions from the data you give them. So you upload the data, and then it decides, it's based on the questions you ask it, like I can answer this question, or I can't answer this question. So anything that is very high risk, like law documents, for example, are phenomenal for this. I did experiment the other day in the town I live in. I took all of our town ordinances and put it into Notebook LM, and then I said, which of these ordinances could be misused by an unethical mayor to disadvantage, underserved populations? And said this ordinance, this ordinance, and this ordinance. And then I was able to see this is how it can find the information. So let me pull up a copy of it. Let's see, COVID. So I have about 500,000 pages of data about COVID and long COVID in here. And I can ask it a specific question. Let's go to Notebook Guide. I'll first do that. And then what are the major ACE2 interactions in COVID? And so if I ask it a question in this system and it doesn't know the answer, it will say, I can't help you. If it does know the answer, it will tell you that, and then it will provide you a link to the citation from the original source texts. So think about this, if you had like all of your contracts or all of your RFP responses or anything where like, I need to know which RFP this sample text came from. This is a great, great tool. This one is free. They do not track your data, but human reviewers can review it. So again, don't put anything super confidential in here. But yeah, that's really cool. Go ahead.
What is the process for, and do you need to use the developer version that you are using if you wanted to take, like you mentioned, your whole town's, I can't remember what.
Ordinances, yeah.
Yes. What is the actual process for inputting or for getting that information into either,
Yeah, well, our town's website just has this one really long page because it's city government. So I just print it as a PDF, and I can just put the PDF right into the tool of my choice.
Okay, if you were going to do that for, say, I don't know what would be publicly available, but
city specs.
Yeah, city specs. It would be a bunch of different documents.
Mm-hmm.
What would that look like?
Ideally, it's PDFs or plain text files. Those are the two formats these tools do the best with.
So would that mean going in?
Go to the city website, download it. Yep.
Thousands of PDFs and then pasting them?
Just
It's like a real basic one.
it would depend on how they were formatted. So if I was doing that myself and it was like 1,000 PDFs, but they were all one page long, there are very, very old school system tools where you can just say glue all these PDFs together into one big old PDF. And then you would just drop that one big PDF into the system of your choice rather than putting in 1,000 documents because they won't handle that. They'll yell at you.
So there's not like a crawler that could go onto the city's website and go, oh, here's how all the specs are stored and grab those.
No, so if you have, you might want to talk to your marketing department and ask if they have SEO tools that allow them to crawl a website, and then you could do it that way. The most straightforward way is to have the tool just write the crawler for you in Python and say, go crawl the city's website. I have one that I said, okay, we're going to write a crawler. I'm going to give you the starting URL and crawl every page on this site that is a PDF. And download it, and then don't bother with anything else. So you can tell the tool, we're going to write a Python script, it's going to do this thing, here's the best practices, go and write the code, and it will write the code for you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you all so much for joining our event tonight. Chris has been fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You might be wondering why McGuire and Hester and WIOps teamed up to bring you this event tonight. And, I know that some of us in here may even be competitors, right? And that's apparent when you say, hey, whose website do we want to get on? Whose job description do we want to look at? But really, our industry is so much more powerful when we come together, right? And when we share this type of information. And I think it's not unknown that construction is not always the first to adapt, right? But I believe that we are seeing just tremendous change in the last decade. I mean, I've been here since 2007 here at McGuire and Hester, and I really appreciated that every step of the way I've received hey, go for it, like, look into it, get outside of our company, network, figure out what is the best way to do things, share things with one another. And that's what WIOps is all about. So I really hope that you enjoyed tonight. Chris has been extremely gracious. I believe he even offered to stay back a little bit and answer more questions. I know it's an inquisitive group, so you might be regretting that choice soon. But we do have some refreshments still out. Please help yourself. And again, thank you so much for joining us here tonight.
Thank you for being here.